Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, a show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives on the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Tamsin Lambert, who's a talent excellence advisor at Shell. Welcome to the show, Tamsin. How are you?
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm very well, thank you. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So before we jump in, tell everyone a bit about yourself personally and
Sure.
your journey to where we are today.
Who am I? Where have I come from? So by trade, by day, I'm an occupational psychologist slash talent management specialist. I'm a mum of two. That sounds like the world's worst superhero, but anyway.
It's a superhero job, though, being a mum. So
Well, it has its moments, trust me, it has its moments, as you well know, actually.
Yeah.
So a bit of a weird and wonderful journey to my current role within Shell's Global Centre of Excellence for Talent. I have a background in psychology academically. My first proper job was working in a high security prison in a forensic psychologist type role, really working with people who had committed quite serious crimes and who also had been diagnosed as having one or more personality disorders. It was a very formative role, and became really fascinated by the people who actually worked in the prison environment at all levels. There's some really brilliant, awe-inspiring people, as you can probably imagine. And it really brought me the interest in getting the right people in the right jobs at the right time. So after doing that, I went and did postgraduate study in occupational psychology, or for any US listeners, industrial organizational psychology, and then took a range of internal and external consultancy roles across the prison service. Again, I worked in the UK Home Office for a bit, and then I had some private sector roles in consultancy, so consulting with organizations across financial, professional services, the legal world, the oil and gas industry, on a range of large-scale assessment and selection projects. And that's how I met Shell. So Shell were my client for quite a large-scale assessment project. And they were one of my toughest but most loved clients in terms of
nice way of putting it there. Nice way of putting it.
Well, yes. They were, as a client, eternally curious. They were always looking for innovation, best practice, to really push the boundaries of what could be done with a real emphasis on quality. And I fell in love. And that was 7 years ago. Haven't got the 7-year itch just yet. But in Shell, I've gone through a range of jobs. So I've gone into an assessment consultancy role. I've worked in our data and analytics function. And I currently find myself in the Talent Centre of Excellence, which is where the team focus on driving excellence in global talent management.
Amazing. Well, what a journey. And it's funny how when people end up at Shell, they just don't leave. There's something about Shell. If you speak to any leader at Shell, it's like, 10, 20, even 30 years, some of the people I speak to as well, they find a real home.
That really is it. And so I've been at Shell for 7 years, as I've said, and in some ways I'm still seen as quite a newbie, which in other organizations would be crazy. So traditionally here, we tend to rotate through assignments. You get stretched and developed in different ways. And it really is like having a new job with new stakeholders on a really regular basis. Added to that, the global reach, the amount of stakeholders and cultures you interact with, there's definitely enough to keep you on your toes from a day-to-day and year-to-year basis. Whether we'll see the same trends in a 20, 30-year career within Shell, I haven't got a crystal ball, but I think that might shift a bit over the coming years.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about the current work you're doing. Why is Shell so interested in the concept of leadership potential?
We've been interested in this in a very long time. So it probably starts with going back to sort of the 1960s. And at that point, some gentleman did a PhD working with Shell. And they titled it The Qualities of Man. So it's changed quite a bit. They did. So it's changed quite a bit since then.
God.
In essence, it was actually quite forward-looking at the time. It was about trying to understand what are the qualities, what are the behaviours it takes to be successful in this organisation. And what it led to, the underlying research and the theory, led to us developing an approach to identifying leadership potential, which in essence has been the cornerstone management for the last 50 plus years. And what it's done is it's helped us to identify the people who've steered the company to where we are today. And we're interested in it because by identifying people's potential, and bear in mind, we're a really large organisation, But by trying to identify the people who we think have the strongest potential to deliver in our most senior roles, it really helps us to ensure that we're investing in the people with the strongest propensity to reach those roles. And when I say investment, I mean in terms of time, I mean in terms of giving them the critical experiences, I mean in terms of investing in their development opportunities to make sure we're supporting the people to reach their ultimate potential as early as possible, to then give them that runway and to give us that value for them to deliver and to take our organisation where it needs to go. And it's paid off. So having looked at this since the 1960s, it's really become part of our DNA. It's part of our culture. It's part of our language. So even people in very technical or commercial roles talk about potential like we do in HR, which I think is really valuable and is a real sign of what you can do when you really embed HR thinking and HR process deep into the organisation. What we've been doing with some subtle changes over the last 50 odd years is at a certain level in an organisation, we've been assessing a large number of people. I think it was 55,000 people last time we did it, every 2 years, on whether they have the qualities and the behaviours needed to predict success in our organisation and our industry. And we've been looking at predicting success in terms of what is their end of career potential. And we're doing this through asking line managers to complete quite a manual process to give a view of someone's ultimate potential. And we're really proud of the rigour and the importance we've placed on it. But as I mentioned, times are changing. And I look around us and we have this perfect storm, if you like, of different factors. So looking to the external world to begin with, we have what we call the energy transition, which those of you who are working in an oil and gas industry might be aware of. So this is basically the need to move from conventional oil and gas products to cleaner, more sustainable energy solutions. And against that context, we have also evolving the competitive and external environment. So we're seeing new business models coming up. We're having more and more nimble and more agile competitors cropping up. We're seeing, think about, for example, Extinction Rebellion. We're seeing huge societal pressure on our organisation and our industry to adapt, to change. And all these things in combination place greater demands on our leaders. So put simply, what's got us here isn't necessarily going to get us there. And actually what we need is probably better, ever differentiating leaders to help us to navigate these waters. And so therefore it's important that we identify them as quickly and as accurately as possible. I think I mentioned a perfect storm of factors. So there's the external piece I've just outlined. There's also the internal piece, a bit of a navel gazing, if you like. So we've been doing this for 50 years. I think it's really vital that we stop and we reflect and we learn from our experience. So we're not the same company that we used to be. We have different leaders. We want different leaders in the future. But we also have a wealth of experience we can sit back and learn from. And in doing so, we also look to the external world. So the external academic and practitioner literature and practice haven't stood still either. So a lot's changed in 50 years. I wanted to make sure we're capitalising on the latest thinking, the latest technology, and also the latest data. So long answer to a short question, but the old approach has served us well, but it's now time to make sure we reviewed it to make sure it's fair, it's accurate, and it's as modern as possible.
What do you hope to achieve by this change? Because obviously, you've been so successful so far. What are you hoping to achieve with this new change, with it, change initiative that you're going through?
A number of things, and I think it's important we focus on the things we can actually control. So I'd probably say there are 4 key things that I would like to see us move the needle on. So number 1, it's improving how accurate we are at predicting who our future leaders are going to be. That's really important to us, and making it more objective. Number 2, it's around getting really, really real. So making sure that we're identifying the top, most differentiating people, recognizing we're going to need fewer potentially and ever better leaders into the future. So we don't want to inflate who we say is our top talent. We want to get really focused. Thirdly, and really importantly, I'd like to rebalance our emphasis on the skills and the competencies that we need to get us to thrive through that transition I spoke about earlier. So it's really recognizing that the balance of skills and competence that's got us here is going to change, and wanting to make sure we have rounded leaders. And then fourthly, and really importantly in my mind personally, is enabling the employees to have a greater voice. So traditionally, potential identification has been done to people a fair bit. And what I want to do is enable employees to take increased ownership of their career development and do potential identification with us rather than have it done to them. So we're launching the refreshed approach tomorrow. So in a few months' time, I'll let you know how we're getting on. What's done is done. We're ready to go. We're ready for a few weeks now. And I'll connect with you in a few months' time to let you know if any of those aims have been... could do, couldn't we? Yes. The return of Tamsin. Daunting thought.
One of the questions that we spoke about before is, is the concept of long-term potential still relevant in today's world?
It's one which, when we first started to look at this, we chewed over a lot. And I'm going to give a real politician's answer here. Yes and no. I know. I would say it really depends on the organisation. It depends on the nature of the industry. It depends on the answer to the question of potential for what, and also what you plan to do with high potential folks once they're identified. So let me give an example. If you're working in a short-term context where there's high turnover, or where value is created on the basis of short gig-type engagements or assignments, then investing in identifying long-term leadership potential might not still be relevant. But it will be important to identify and deploy your value creators as quickly as possible. For longer term industries and roles where value is created over time, or organizations with shrinking footprints or longer employer tenures, I think potential identification is still valid currency. But I think even if it does remain relevant, I think we're going to see some changes to how it is done. So, for example, looking at ultimate end of career potential, I think is less relevant these days. We're seeing tenures decreasing across industries. We're seeing people have more fluid employment contracts, and we're seeing also expectations of employees changing. So I think starting to look at nearer term potential or promotability might get more common. I think, as I alluded to earlier as well, employer expectations are increasing. We're getting more demanding as employees. And I think there's less willingness, therefore, to be a passive participant in development and assessment. So I think, again, we're going to see it being done more with people rather than to people. So a bit of a yes and no. As I said, we think it's still relevant for us, and we did question it, but for others, it won't be. I think it's also quite critical for me to say that I don't kid myself that what we're putting in place as of tomorrow is going to be in place for another 50 years. The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. The nature of work, the content of jobs is going to continue to evolve. So evolve, not involve. And I think, therefore, we at Shell and also other organisations should continue to ask ourselves, potential for what? And continue to think about how we measure potential. So, for example, the behaviours needed to really shine today will change. So I listened to one of your recent podcasts about the gentleman from Oracle, and he spoke about Deloitte and the concept of super jobs. So people who are working with a day-to-day role, but also partnering very closely with AI and technology. And you think about to shine in a super job compared to today, you're going to need a different set of skills and competence. 100%. So that potential is going to look very different. I also think we're on the cusp of different methods being available to us. So how we assess potential today could evolve. So things like natural language processing, automation, augmentation, predictive analytics, they're going to play an increasingly large role in this. And it's certainly something we're interested in looking at and also acting our way into. So quite a politician's answer there, but I hope it shows you the level of critical thinking we're putting to this around what works for us now, and recognizing we're going to have to be more flexible into the future as well.
Yeah. What are some of the key elements of your updated approach?
I could talk about this for hours, so I know I haven't got hours. Let me talk about the key updates here. So what we wanted to do, let me focus again on what we want to get out of this. So it's really around improving our accuracy. It's trying to improve our realism around identifying who those top leaders are going to be, and also trying to improve employee centricity. So I think one of the first things I'll point to our updates is we've updated our behavioural model of potential. So the things that we think are really important to us now. And these are no longer the qualities of man, you'll be pleased to hear. We've refreshed our behaviours, we've validated
That's the first
them.
one. Yeah.
We tested them cross-culturally. And so we know that they're relevant across our global business. And that's really important to us. We've also put increased emphasis on the behaviours that we're going to need our leaders to have to help us thrive through that energy transition and to deliver our strategy. We know that we need to continue to evolve, and we're putting increased emphasis on learning orientation and agility, recognising we need to shift from a company who's previously valued knowing stuff and being really, really smart. And we need to change from being knowers to being a company who seeks to learn and who has the humility not to have all the answers, but to be interested in wanting to get them. That's going to take us that massive shift.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be done just by potential. It's going to be done through multiple different HR processes, approaches, and multiple people's culture change. Other big changes. So we've moved to online tooling rather than manual tooling, and try to increase our objectivity of how assessments are actually done. And really supported that online assessment with really rich reporting, which moves away from just identifying people who are high potential, but also supporting line managers and employees to have really rich, high quality conversations about their potential, but what the organisation can do to help them realise that potential, whatever that might be. Incidentally, one thing I'm really, really proud of is we have statistically validated that tooling. So we know statistically that the online tool we've developed helps us to accurately predict leadership potential within Shell. It works in our context. I'm super proud of that. So I'm not aware of any other organisation who have done that themselves internally with an internally developed and validated. Yeah, I'm not me on my own, no. There's a massive shout out, I'd say, to our internal data analytics team, our assessment experts, our IT team, and also supported by an external vendor as well to host our solution. Wow. I'm super, super proud of that and the team.
You work with Esther on that, Esther.
Her team have been really instrumental in this. It's been a real cross-HR effort.
Well, she's a rock star, so definitely.
She is. She used to manage me. She's my boss a few years ago.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah.
Small world.
So you can blame her. Yeah.
Oh, right. That's pretty incredible.
Getting on to some of the real important things now. We've also narrowed our focus. So I mentioned to you previously, we were assessing around 55,000 people every 2 years at one point. We've narrowed that. We've got a lot more incisive. So from here on in, we're going to be assessing at a more senior level and also on a less frequent basis. And this decision is really rooted in our data, which gave us insight into when it is actually most meaningful to assess for long-term leadership potential. And also focusing on a smaller group helps us to invest more time in higher quality assessments. For us, it's what we call sort of a job group 2, which means nothing to anyone else.
But
in essence, it's sort of your first rung into senior leadership. So people who are experienced, like mid-career level. Okay. And our data tells us that is the level at which we are making most accurate assessments, and when it's most meaningful, start having conversations with people about their long-term future within this company. But by doing that, we are removing potential identification and a conversation at the lower job groups in our company. Again, that's based on data. So we learned through partnership with data analytics that we were perhaps trying to look at end of career potential too soon. And that was having unintended consequences. So it was putting labels on people. Like, we think you're going to be this. And it was causing a bit of anxiety, but also self-fulfilling prophecies. So you had people who were ascending to great things, but it raised the question, did they ascend because they really were that good, or because we put a label on them really early in their career?
Interesting.
What we've done now is we've shifted our emphasis somewhat. So rather than talking about potential in early career, we've shifted our emphasis to talking about performance and short-term promotability instead. And we're saying that is what's going to help you stand out in your early career, not your ultimate potential. And what we hope to drive with this is a bit of trial and error. So encouraging line managers and employees to stretch and to test without the label of your ultimate potential hanging over your head or holding you back. Really daunting. Imagine being a graduate and being told that in 30, 35 years' time, all this could be yours, my child. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And also it speaks to quite a past model of employment.
The job of life doesn't exist anymore. It won't exist soon, it does say. Yeah.
Absolutely. No way. And I guess the last thing I would say is probably increasing our emphasis on this being done with people rather than to people. So alongside simple potential identification, we're also looking at introducing self-development tooling, so robust, externally validated self-development tools to help our people help themselves, to get to know themselves, their preferences, what they want, and to drive these really mature and frank conversations with their managers around what they want, where they want to go, and what Shell can do to help them get there.
How does this link into Shell's broader approach to talent management?
I think it's a really important one to think about. So it does link in, and it links into a number of different strands, if you like, of our talent management strategy. I think that's really important to have a mutually reinforcing approach across different areas. So I'll give some practical examples. So firstly, it links in directly with our approach to performance and performance management. So prior to refreshing our approach to potential, we also refreshed our approach to performance management. And that refreshed approach puts increased emphasis on awarding standout performers who really drive disproportionate value and make the greatest contribution to our company, but also broadening and deepening everyone's focus on performance and delivery. And the revised approach to potential echoes these themes. So it really frames performance as people's passport to potential and opportunity. So, for example, only starting to talk to people about their long-term potential once they've demonstrated that strong track record of performance and delivery. And also increasing the emphasis on performance in earlier career and using that as your currency to open doors and to get those test opportunities rather than long-term potential. It also serves as an input to a number of other strands of our talent approach. So, for example, someone's potential outcome is a key source, but not the only source of data for things like decisions around talent management. So global mobility, expatriation, who gets those opportunities, who we place in our succession plans for our most critical roles which drive the most value. And also around how we identify the people who need to have the critical experiences and the accelerated support via our leadership development strategy and offerings. So it's a really interconnected and intermeshed web, if you like.
Yeah, this all sounds amazing, but I'm sure it wasn't easy, right?
No, you see the grey hairs probably.
What were some of the mistakes that you made along the way, or sort of the biggest learning moments you had?
Depends who you ask about the mistakes I've made. There's been many, I'm sure. It's been a huge learning experience, both for us as an organisation and me as an individual. It has really equipped me to work with and through other people who aren't within my direct line of report, but really working with different parts of the business, all of us speaking slightly different languages, both in terms of geographical location, but also IT experts, data analytics experts, vendor management. It's been a real learning experience in delivering and managing through people. So that's been really, really rich for me. I've loved that. It's also given me some learning experiences. Probably two things I'd say, actually. So number one, I think we underestimated the extent of the stakeholder engagement and alignment that would need to be done.
But after that long, after it being ingrained in the DNA of the business, that must be really difficult.
It's so deeply embedded. I remember when I first started this piece of work, I asked so many people what do you think about this? And it was one of those conversation starters. I was inundated. I was the most popular person of the time being, like emails, like instant messages, people stopping me. Everyone had an opinion on it. And that's great in some ways because there's so much rich data to learn from. But it was really quite bamboozling.
But now you've got to please everyone.
Exactly. And you can't do that. You've got to basically have a very clear view of what is important, what we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. So that's number one. I underestimated the extent of that. And it took longer, therefore, than expected to get this signed off from the powers that be and also embedded. And there's obviously more we could do. We'll act our way into that. The second thing is probably the time it took to get my head and my arms around the IT landscape, if you like, and the challenges with deploying new online solutions in our particular context. I really wish I'd got more fluent in that earlier and understood the linkages, as I mentioned in the answer to the previous question, to other parts of our talent landscape, both explicit and implicit, and capitalize on those earlier. It's definitely been a learning curve. It's been a great opportunity and one I'm immensely proud of, and the people who've worked on it as well.
Yeah, but that's why I wanted to ask both personally and professionally, because everyone talks about the successes, but no one really talks about the learning moments and the difficult challenges. But that's where the growth happens, right?
Massively. And I think I came into this as a very different HR practitioner as I'll go out of it. And I think part of that is through the content of the work. And part of it, I think, is around working with sort of really authentic and really sort of, kill me for saying this, but perfectly imperfect leaders who I've learned a great deal from.
We all know what you mean.
Yeah, massively, in terms of what it takes to be a good HR leader. I've learned a great deal.
Nice. Exciting times.
Really exciting.
I jump into some questions on LinkedIn because the people have been going ham on LinkedIn with questions. I feel like I'm ignoring you guys. So one of the questions that's come up a few times is could you talk about more about how you improved the employee experience?
Yeah,
when it comes to assessments. Yeah.
One of the key themes that we heard when we asked about our old approach was the word subjectivity. So a lot of employees were quite concerned in our old approach, only one line manager was contributing to assessments of their end of career potential. So we put a lot of emphasis on increasing that perceived and real objectivity. So we're bringing in more views which contribute to the ultimate assessment. So line manager and others are contributing to someone's ultimate assessment, which has been a really popular change that we've made. We've also removed that label, if you like, from a number of people who quite early in their careers are saying, we don't want this. This is too much too soon.
It's intense. Yeah.
Really intense. And it's done with good. And it's done with really good intention, but and some people thrived on it, but others didn't
would thrive
so
on
much.
To be honest, young me would be all over that. I love that, but yeah, I can understand some people maybe not what the opposite way. Yeah.
So I think that's another key thing, which has really helped our employee experience. So listening to what people are saying. And I think thirdly is the investment that we are making in not just leadership potential identification for the few at the top of the house, but the investment that we're making in helping people understand themselves better, those self-development tools I spoke about earlier. So giving anyone at any level in an organization the tool to say, who am I? What do I want? What do I think I'm good at? And where do I think I could re-stretch myself? And using that to drive better quality conversations with their line managers. So again, it's not just a line manager saying, we think, Chris, you are person X and you're going to do this.
You get pigeonholed in this.
Exactly. So it's that real two-way, more mature relationship, which we're really hoping drives the employee experience. But if you let me come back in the future, I'll tell you if that aim has been realized.
What's next for you then? Are you going to carry on with the implementation now for the next few years? How things change for you? Or are you going to have another baby? Or have another baby?
Oh gosh, the $1 million question. No, that shop is shut. So I think for me personally, it will remain on my radar for at least the next year. So I really want to see this through.
I'm sure you've done all that hard work. You want to see it come to life, right?
It's my third baby, absolutely. So I really want to learn from it. I want to evaluate it. I want to embed it. And I want to make sure that the team who then run it again in 3 years' time can learn from what we've done and can benefit from the improvements we've identified. So that's on my radar. Another thing at the moment we're starting to really get into is looking at Shell's approach to embedding our revised people strategy and talent management strategy. So one of those core things is looking at our approach to reskilling and upskilling. So recognizing that
it's such a big topic right now.
Oh, it's huge.
Huge. Every single HR leader I speak to, reskilling, upskilling, it's like there, number one in the top three.
It's huge, and it's a huge amount of reading. There's some great vendors in the marketplace, and we're just at the cusp of looking into what it means for us as an organization, what benefits we can get, but also what can our employees get from it from an employability perspective, recognizing that they're going to have ever longer careers. Like you and I, Chris, going to be working for an awfully long time.
Don't say that.
We are, I'm afraid we are.
I thought that you start a business and you sell it and you retire young. Is that not what it is? I got it all wrong.
Tell me next year, but I don't know. But we're going to having increasing lifespans, increasing careers, and also we're seeing portfolio careers, or the multi-hyphenate careers, I've recently heard it termed, which I love, by the way. And so we're looking at the concept of what it means for us as a business, but also what it can do to support our employees in their ongoing employability.
Nice. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think that's the perfect time to wrap things up. So thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure always. I think we had a lovely chat before the show. We should have just pressed go live sooner.
We should have, shouldn't we? We should have.
Well. We was having a great time before, and then we just went, we've got to go live. Before we wrap up with this sort of one parting piece of advice for everyone listening who's on this journey, what would that be? And also, what's the best way for our audience to get in touch with you if they want to reach out, say hello?
Okay, so let me take a piece of advice first. So, piece of advice, do your research, both internally and externally. What's your data telling you? What can you learn from the outside world? But also recognize there's no answer in the back of the book. So what worked for us isn't necessarily going to work for you in your organizations. So take the time to understand what you're trying to achieve, your industry, your organizational drivers, what you hold dear, and your heritage. And that will guide you to a solution that's optimized for you and your context. So that's probably my parting pearl of wisdom, if I may. In terms of getting in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Tamsin Lambert. Very happy to engage with people, to share our journey, and also to hear what other people are doing in this area. I am eternally nosy in this area, so it'd be really great to hear other people's views and insights.
Fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you for joining us. First LinkedIn Live, so I appreciate you joining us. It's always a pleasure. And for everyone listening, if you're new to the show, if you haven't already subscribed, head over to hrdleaders.com/podcast, and there you'll be able to subscribe on your favorite platform as well. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your week, Tamsin, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. All right.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers, folks. Take care.
Bye.